the way forward. So we are looking from where we are now, how we're going to take steps to get to be forward, to make change, to really not stay stuck where we are, but take what we know, what we've seen come out of today's discussions, and really implement it through the civil society organizations, to the media, just like Jenna. What can we do to move from here to where we really want to go? So Daryl, welcome, and I'll have you jump right in now.
Sure, thank you for having me. I'd just like to thank everyone for being here as we have this closeout session. I am a gender advocate.
Daryl, hold on one moment. We're not hearing you, so I'll let you know when we're hearing you.
Sure.
Go right ahead, Daryl.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm a gender advocate with Caribbean Male Action Network.
Daryl, I think you're talking, but we're still having a little bit of technical difficulties. So I'll let you know when to go again. I'm so sorry about that. Try again for me, Daryl.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So my name is Daryl George, and I am a gender advocate. Currently, I am working with CARIMAN, that's Caribbean Male Action Network, and we fight for gender justice and gender equality by working with men and boys around the Caribbean. Specifically, I am on the regional executive, but currently I'm also serving as the chapter coordinator for Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you for that, Daryl. Gemma, if you can give us a brief description of who you are, what you do, and how you will be contributing to this space, I'd love that.
Okay. So my name is Jenna Hundy. I am the managing editor of the Observer Media Group. I've been there for the last just over 2 years. Journalist by profession. I've been working as a journalist for 20 years, 16 of them in the Caribbean. I spent the first 6 years living and working in the Turks and Caicos Islands. I moved here a decade ago. I freelanced for many years for various international agencies, and much of my stories have been focused on telling stories of ordinary people, whether that's social stories, cultural, historical, or environmental sometimes as well. And I was absolutely delighted to, when Corin asked Observer to partner on their Deceit programme. It's a topic I feel very passionately about, and I have for a long time. I've written about various strides that have been made in the region with regards to LGBTQI rights. So we did a series of stories, as you pointed out earlier, and it was a privilege, really, to have that much trust invested in us for people to tell us their very personal stories and put themselves in such a vulnerable space. I mean, we all know how cruel just social media users can be. And I warned all of them, I asked all of them, are you speaking on the record? Are you happy for me to name you? And honestly, I was blown away by their courage. And I was also really heartened by how well received the stories were as well. And obviously, great strides have been made, even just by virtue of the fact that we're sitting here today. So I've been really happy to be a part of that.
Thank you for that. So the first thing I want to jump into is to kind of marry Gemma, your role with the media. My question, I'm going to ask Gemma a different question, but they're going to be linked. Is Gemma, what role do you see the media in Antigua? And Daryl, actually, you can answer this as well. What role do you see the media in Antigua and Barbuda and the wider Caribbean playing in empowering members of the LGBTI community? And then, because Daryl is here for CARIMAN, right, something I want to really address and really pull out is and we saw it come out in the report today, is that the society has a different, there seems to be not that it's accepted, but there is more tolerance towards lesbian and women who are part of the community. So how can the media and groups like CARIMAN really work to engage tolerance and really decrease stigma and discrimination for men who have sex with men, whether they identify as gay, bisexual, or otherwise? So Daryl, you start, and then Gemma will have you. Daryl, you're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. Is the lighting coming off a bit too bright?
No, we can see you clearly.
Okay. All right, great. Okay, so for me, I think one of the major issues that we have, speaking to the second half of your question, is that we're looking at our gender roles and gender norms. And for men, of course, everyone's gender norms are policed in different ways. However, for men specifically, there is a lot more stigma in terms of gender roles and gender norms surrounding the MSM community, specifically for men, and playing a specific role in terms of the gender norms. So that's one of the major reasons why if a lesbian woman or a bisexual woman wouldn't get the same pushback in terms of her sexual orientation as a man would. And not only that, when we look at gender itself, there's a lot of discussion and issues around, again, policing men, especially how we consider and the response towards men, their gender roles and their gender norms. So I think that is one of the reasons why, again, we have all of this negative stigma, especially for men. As we would have mentioned earlier, for women, it's a bit more fetishized in a way. So both of them are policed, but in a different way and in a different manner. And what we need to do is to really promote the idea, as we mentioned, everyone should be able to live their own truth. Everyone should be able to feel comfortable expressing themselves, their gender identity, their sexual preferences, once whatever they're doing is not harming anybody, and a person who is within the LGBTQI community is not harming anyone just by being a member of that community. So I think we really have to push the idea that it is okay. Even what the question is not whether or not you agree. The issue is everyone should be allowed to express themselves in a manner that they best feel fit. And we should spend a lot less time or no time in trying to police or enforce these very strict gender norms, because they don't work for everyone.
Thank you for that. That was very insightful, very thoughtful. Gemma, I really want you to focus on when you're talking. I really would like to get your focus in terms of how the media, what the role the media plays in this discussion, in the way forward, in the language that you use, and the telling of the stories. Specifically in Antigua and Barbuda, which you've been all over, you've traveled over. What is the role that you really see the media has in all of this?
Well, the media has a critical role to play. I think regionally, so many of these issues have not been discussed in an open forum. So first and foremost, the main thing is getting those personal stories out there and providing a space where people feel comfortable to get their story out there. No, they're not going to be misrepresented or misquoted. And also, when you put those personal stories out there, as Cora alluded to earlier, people can then read them in private and they get to understand some of the things. I mean, any issue, unless it has a human face on it, people don't understand. As soon as you give a space for people to be able to speak very openly and frankly and put it out there in a place that people can read it privately and understand, and see that people are human, it's not an issue, it's actually affecting people, many people on a day-to-day basis. That's crucial. The other important thing is correct use of pronouns, and the media has not always done a good job on that. Even just recently, we had a discussion in the newsroom, and the newsroom would observe and know preferred pronouns are what we use, regardless of what your birth-assigned pronoun was, and that's crucial. And it also sends a very strong message to the public that this is what we expect from you. This is the standard. That's what we need to do. And also, the other thing I wanted to say about the Seeds programme was it was very important to me that the reporters themselves were invested and had a sense of ownership in it, because I could have just written all the articles myself. I wrote the first one to sort of kick it off and set the tone. And I was really heartened by how many of the reporters took up the issue themselves and were very keen to actually want to be a part of it and want to write it. And when they have that sense of ownership, then, you know, they carry that on with them as well into their different circles. And I think that was vital.
Thank you for that. Another thing, and I'm going to just, one of the things that I really appreciate, you know, you talk about the ownership and the importance of pronouns, Gemma. You mentioned that. Do you think in Antigua and Barbuda we have enough media sensitivity training, and not only with News Co, but just generally the news outlets and these organizations that exist to put news out into the public, the media generally? Do you think that we have enough media sensitivity training, and is that something that we can look towards doing?
To be perfectly honest, because all my training was overseas when I first started, I'm not actually that familiar with what kind of training happens here with regards to that. But I think as long as it happens in newsrooms and people get that sort of level of indoctrination there, then that's where it has to happen.
And Daryl, I know you are not a media practitioner just like Gemma, but based on your lived experience here, what do you think about the way our media approaches conversations about these kind of topics and the sensitivity that we see or don't see?
Yeah, I think Gemma hit it straight on the head. One of the issues is that I know that in several newsrooms around Antigua and Barbuda, a lot of the persons working there may not necessarily have had a significant amount or level of training. So they come with a certain background or certain beliefs in terms of how do we present, again, persons within the LGBTQI community. So I think it's important that all of the newsrooms really are able to set a standard in terms of how we treat everyone with respect and dignity when we are doing reporting on a national basis.
Well, a question for you about Karaman. In terms of pushing the way forward, in terms of really instigating and championing the change, what are some of the things that you guys as an organization are doing?
So we are involved in a number of projects. A lot of what we're doing right now is we're still building the groundwork in terms of the country programs. However, we have been working with a number of projects, primarily in Trinidad and Tobago, because that is basically where Karaman was founded. But again, we are looking to see how we can really improve the reach of our projects. So we have been working on a number and providing support for a number of programs around gender norms, gender justice, also providing support for LGBTQIA groups around the Caribbean. We're currently working on a project that will actually provide some information, for example, for persons who want to receive support, whether that's on sexuality education, whether they are an LGBTQI person and want support, advice, or referrals. We're working on some documents that will provide information for them, provide guidance, and provide some next steps for what they should do, how they should proceed.
Thank you for that. And then Gemma, over to you. What are some of the ways, do you see the media going forward? So, you talked about what happens in News Co with the newsroom and the way that you allow them to, your staff, as to champion, right? But do you think that, maybe a suggestion, do you think that News Co and other newsrooms in Antigua can start to maybe put spotlights on organizations like MESH and like Men and Carryman? Is there any kind of a way, just like you collaborated, is that something that we can expect more of?
Yeah, I think there's always room to do more campaigns. I'm always open to ideas on those kind of things. And they're really important. There was a lot of consideration about what we were going to call it, what the tagline was going to be. So Be You came about after some sort of brainstorming. Then it's Be Loud, Be Proud, Be You. And all of these things went straight to the core of what we were trying to do. So a campaign is one thing. The other thing we really need is more spokespeople. When we address certain issues, I sometimes find there's a real absence of people to actually call call to get a comment, with the side effect that it's always the same voices you hear, and then publicly it gives the impression that there's only a small amount of people affected, when actually it's not. It affects many, many people, and frankly, it affects all of us. So when we have more spokespeople to speak out about it, I think it has a really big impact. So that's one thing that I'm always looking for, and I think that's crucial.
It's just one of the things one of our guests here today, Joyanne, would have mentioned that we need to empower members of the community to self-actualize so that they can be present. And I think Gemma just basically echoed those sentiments. And I just really, because, as she said, you hear the same people over and over in a space, you start to think, oh, it's just them. But Gemma is saying, and I'm calling on anybody who's online, who's here, to push to help the members of the community to self-actualize, to take up space in a real and meaningful way. And so we see groups like Carrie Man and Mesh and Men, Daryl, your groups are going to be able to really give men who have sex with men, LGBTQ, queer, even cisgender heterosexual men to be advocates and allies, the space really to be a voice and to champion a cause that then the media like Gemma can clearly see that so they can amplify your voice, and the general public in Antigua and Barbuda can say, oh, okay, this is not just a little small section of society, but it really is something that we need to push. And Gemma, besides I know you're in the traditional media, but I want to talk about like non-traditional media, like social media, because that is very impactful these days. What are some of the things that you expect from social media, or you can suggest that we can see social media doing in terms of pushing the way forward?
Okay, social media is a big one. I mean, when I started as a journalist, there was no social media. I mean, we hardly even used email. Gosh, that's how long I've been a journalist for. But I mean, we know that social media has massively changed the landscape, and I think we're one of the only media organisations that doesn't remove the negative comments, because I like us to be held accountable. We have to be transparent. As soon as you start editing the comments, you get yourself into very dangerous ground, and obviously censorship. But one thing we do have to do is there's a balance to strike. So we have a duty not to provide a space for people to spread hate. So the only comments that we ever remove are ones that do that. So if there's some homophobic comments, we take those down straight away. But there's a real fine line to tread between freedom of speech and censorship. And that's obviously, again, not a responsibility I take lightly. So we always have to be cognizant of that.
Thank you for that. And then Daryl, Caraman, talk to me about the way that Caraman is using social media to push forward, to really create a new path for this movement.
So yeah, we didn't get a chance to do much last year, but in 2020, we would have had, for example, a 16 Days of Activism campaign, where we would have worked along with a number of different groups to really promote messaging around gender and gender justice. And of course, that would include LGBTQI community issues, but it also would have included quite a bit on sexual and reproductive health and rights. So we would have promoted messages around those areas, around those themes on social media. For the campaign that we're doing again, that is also going to be looking at SRH, sexual and reproductive health and rights, including specifically for the LGBTQI plus community. So there'll be some information on social media about that through there. There'll also be a number of video public service announcements that will be developed for that campaign that will be used on social media.
So we can look up, and for everybody here, if maybe this is your first time becoming familiar with Carrie Man, even if you are, but for whoever, where exactly can you find you? Is it Carrie Man on Instagram, Facebook, or where exactly do we look for you?
Sure. So you can visit our website at carrieman.org. You can we also have Facebook and Instagram pages, Caribbean Male Action Network. And so you can find both of them, or you could visit our website.
Thank you for that. Another question now about like the pressure in terms of legislative change. Is that something that we can expect from the organization Karaman in terms of putting pressure on the government, on the people who have the real tools to shift that change?
So there are many different angles in terms of encouraging change. One of the things that we are doing is working with a recently established advocacy group. The name is slipping me right now, but we're working with them to provide more advocacy, including on the political level, towards looking at issues such as repealing a lot of the really oppressive laws, such as the burglary laws. We're looking at also working with a number of stakeholders in terms of education, and that education does also include education of political actors. So we're doing a few different things in terms of the realms of politics and advocacy to really encourage those who make the legislation to really be educated as to why change is needed and to push to make those changes. I do think that we are still, again, in our early stages, and that is something that we will continue to work on.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing the advocacy groups that you work with and the programs that you're really pushing, and especially, that push for the repeal of these oppressive laws, because we really need the laws to really show that there's a change in our society. And then Gemma, I would love to hear your take on like the laws and the approach and what the role of the media and the law.
Okay, so I think the law is a big one. Lots of people say it's not enforced, why does it matter? It really matters because it sends young, vulnerable people the message that what they're doing is wrong. And it criminalises people just for being themselves. I mean, I wrote before, as I said, when Em was speaking here before, about the various initiatives in 5 different decent Caribbean islands to overturn the so-called buggery law. And when I did, I spoke to the Legal Affairs Minister and I asked him if he had any plans to, and he told me it's not a priority. And as it's been alluded to before, I mean, nobody wants to take that banner and run with it in a legislative way. And I think that's a real shame because as long as that's illegal, I think it stymies so much progress. I mean, you can't even start to talk about same-sex legislation until that's out of the way. That's my personal opinion.
I really appreciate that. And you're right. Without removing that law, we'll kind of stop. And how do we see our way forward if we don't even remove the barriers? Because you can't move forward if there's something right there blocking you. I've really enjoyed the discussion with everybody, but now I want to open the floor for questions. And I just want to remind everybody that is Miss Norton in the room, not staying behind the banner? Okay, she's not. Once she comes back in, we'll open the floor to questions for her. But I would love to open the floor to questions for Gemma and for Daryl to really, I want to know what are your thoughts, what are the things you want to know from them. So if we have any questions, okay. Hold on one moment.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My question to Drama is, what are your plans moving forward for media, since the media like to use incorrect pronouns, and what are you guys going to do in terms of education going forward?
Okay. Daryl, did you hear that question? Okay. Go ahead, Daryl.
Oh, I think that one was for Gemma.
It was for you.
Oh.
Gemma?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I think he was asking him too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gemma.
Okay, so I mean, first and foremost, as I said before, I think it's really important that people know they can trust us when they come to us with their stories. They have to know they can trust that we're going to represent them fairly. The pronouns, yes, it's a big one. And honestly, it's an uphill battle. And the fact that the question was even asked a couple of weeks ago shows there's still some way to go. But we have a policy in place whereby we do use those correct pronouns. And as long as I'm there, that will be the standard. With regards to education, it's just more and more storytelling. Doing campaigns like we did with the Seeds thing, and just trying to speak to as many different people in the community as possible, reach out to as many groups as possible, forge links with all these different groups, Men, Mesh, Carryman, and just show the society basically what's sorry. I mean, just to show that this is a safe place to come and share your stories, and we are going to deal with it responsibly, and that we are responsible, right-minded, thinking journalists. I hope that answers your question. It's a bit stumbly, sorry.
Before I pass around the mic, I want to say something about like the little things like the pronouns. Mm-hmm. I was doing some work with an organization that is interested in period poverty, and the young lady was speaking to me about it, and she was saying, we're going to do campaigns for girls, and we're going to make sure it talks about girls and women. And I said to her, you need to say girls, women, and people who experience periods. And because, it may not matter to people who are not in the community that you use the language people who experience periods, but when you say it to when a non-binary person sees that you've taken that time to really make sure that you've included them, it says something to them. It says you're an ally organization. It says that you understand. It says that, you realize I'm here and I'm present. And I think it goes back to just like what we saw in the research, it's the invisibility. So we want to remove the fact that they're invisible and say, but we see you, we're here for you, and we are talking to you. So this is not to exclude you. And we're going back to the flow of our question. I see I had a hand here with M.
Hi, thanks for the information. Very, very informative, of course. I'm really happy to see media doing this work independently as well, not just because something's available to do. What I wanted to know from Gemma is whether you have followed up with that who interviewed. Have you done any follow-up with them? Not necessarily it was another media story or item, but have you followed up with them to find out? I did hear some mention, or was there any kind of consistent follow-up to get a sense of what the response was, whether positive or negative, and over time has it changed? And again, get a sense through the city's project, what was the reaction of the public as well for somebody who was not involved in the project, but who's perceived to be LGBT plus? Did they notice any reaction subsequent to the stories being put out, whether positive or negative? And also for Daryl, I wanted to ask, apart from Gemma, what is the uptake? Do you reach out to media? Does media reach out to you? What is the current situation with regards to media work in Antigua with your organization?
So, because Gemma answered the last question first, Daryl, I'm going to have you go first.
Sure. So, Carryman, as I mentioned, works primarily with men and boys. So, in general, we have actually had a pretty good relationship on a Caribbean-wide scale when we do approach them on a number of different issues. So, we are supportive in terms of when we're looking at feminist policies. So we talk a lot about a number of different issues around gender justice, around gender norms, around men and boys, and around LGBTQI community. So one of the good things is that discussions on LGBTQI can be sometimes a little bit touchy, and some persons may not want to be as interactive with a group that is only dealing with that one issue just because of public perception. But because of the fact that Carryman around the Caribbean, especially in Trinidad, Dominica, several other countries, has been very active on a number of different issues, you'd find a lot easier engagement when it comes to LGBTQI plus issues. So that has been our general experience.
Thank you for that, Daryl. Jenna?
So yes, in answer to your question, I did reach out to the people, particularly the ones that I personally interviewed. There were 2 or 3 of those. Most people were pleasantly surprised by the reaction and the fact that people were interested in their story, and they dealt with it sensitively, and they praised their courage in speaking out about it. I think that most people found it very cathartic as well. That was a really good thing. And I discussed this with the reporters beforehand, that for some of the people speaking to us, this was the first time ever they'd shared their story. There was one girl in particular who would never even come out to her parents. Here she is telling the entire nation her story. So that was a big thing.
I see another hand. So
yes, it also from a project point of view, following up with the person's with them, because like Jenna said, it's a big thing to get a stranger everything you do. So we want to provide cybersecurity support for them. So we did that, and a lot of them at the end of it said the journalists were compassionate, they were sensitive, they were sure what to expect. But everybody, there was 100% positive responses on the process. Recently, one of the persons relocated, joined the tour group and moved back to ask, can I have a copy of my story so I can share with the persons in North America so they could see what was happening. So now that has taken legs and gone somewhere else. So it was confident.
I'm really pleased to hear that.
I really just want to commend, just based on what I'm hearing from Gemma and, Mr. Norton, that really and truly is what you guys did. It was really meaningful and impactful, because, you don't want this work to just be done and fall away to the wayside. When you have real, what we're doing here, what we're discussing is about real impactful change on people's lives. It affects people. And, when you say catharsis and it's a cathartic experience, I really feel that for them. And I'm really pleased to hear that. And I think that's something I want everybody to take. It's lives we're talking about, real people. Dr. Norton, I want everybody here to know she's back in the room. So if you have any questions for her, we are opening the floor to questions for her. I see she had her hand up, so I think she wants to say something else.
One of the things that also want to realize, Darryl is on the line, I also want to thank Darryl for carrying us. He conducted our training for us on for the peer training exercise.
Okay, I also wanted to thank Daryl George, who's on our Zoom call, for conducting the training on the gender and sexual identities and inclusivity for the peer training exercise. So when I mentioned to you that it's a team effort, I mean it, because everybody in this room has contributed in some way or the other. And it's a really, really exciting experience. Thanks, Mr. George, and good to see you and hear the work you're doing. And his organization also distributed the booklets locally and abroad.
Since I am on my feet, I have a question for Gemma. So Gemma, you seem to be, or your organization, the Media House Observer, to be the pioneer media house that is really trying to push and support the LGBTQI population. What I want to say, though, because I thought of it just now, that we are championing the cause to change the law. But then if we don't try to change mindsets in society, then we'll still have a problem. Because even if the laws are changed and it's on the books, you will still have persons out there discriminating, hate crimes are happening. So I would like to know, what can you do as a media house to get the other media houses on board, so that at least when persons are hearing this through traditional media, through social media, how do we get them to, or reach them, or perform more outreach from a media perspective, so that we can start changing mindsets? Because the more support we can garner out there in society, I think the policymakers then would not have a reason not to change the law. If everyone now, a majority of the population, Oh, I am so sorry. This is the second time I'm talking without introducing myself. I'm Senator Lakeisha Francis James. I'm the independent senator in Antigua and Barbuda. And I'm also an advocate for women against rape. So this is passionate to me. And I've been working in this community for a while now as well. I want to say thanks to Miss Wong, because she was the one that really trained me and brought me on board and opened my eyes to a lot of things that is right in front of me, but you weren't seeing it, you know? So I just want to know, how can you get other media houses on board so we can start changing mindsets in society? Because I know if we get majority or even maybe 60% of the population to be on board with us, then we then can push the policymakers to change the laws. Thank you.
You raise a really good question, because the media is really fractured here for various reasons, and everybody is, affiliated with a different section of society or a different group or whatever. I mean, honestly, trying to get all the media houses together anyway is problematic, and what we really need is a media society. But obviously, that's a discussion for another forum. I mean, I totally hear you. I think sometimes just emulation. I think sometimes just, if they see us doing something, then sometimes, and they see it as a good reaction. For example, the BU stories had a lot of traction on Facebook and were well read according to our analytics. I think if they see that it's popular and it's successful and it's being read and it's reaching people, then sometimes they will emulate it. But I'm also curious to know whether we were the only media agency. I don't actually know whether we were the only media agency that was approached, or whether you went to other people as well and they said no, or what happened. This answers your question, sorry.
That's okay. I think they can hear me from Okay. I am happy that this discussion about the media is on the floor in Antigua and around the region.
No, she's using the speaker.
You're hearing me, Dara? Okay, great. Women Against Rape has been involved with a global organization, and the theme is who makes the news. We have been participating with that organization for the last decade. When we had invited a number of the other media houses, we had a press conference. Gemma, you weren't here at the time. They do not send somebody in an administrative position. They send a lower ranking worker who is not equipped to answer or to commit on behalf of the organization. So what happens is that when that worker returns to their media agency, the most they can do is pass on the information, which many times is not acted upon. We also met with persons like Mr. Colin James and other persons who at the time had the urge, the eagerness and everything to get the media association in Antigua and Barbuda up and running. For whatever reason, nobody wanted to take on the leadership of that association. And so even in the Caribbean, Antigua stands out as one of the countries that do not have a media association. So that is something that has been plaguing us for quite a while. And I agree with Gemma when she says it will take a great effort, a huge effort to get all the media houses together on one platform and put forward what it is we are discussing here today about the media and gender. So going forward, we will still have to reach out to the media houses individually in our various organizations, or as an alliance, reach out to the media houses.
There is this radio station. It's a religious radio station. Beacon something. Anyway, they came once and they never came back because apparently the topic was kind of touchy or out of their bounds, as it were. So with Observer Radio, as one of the leading media houses, carrying forward this discussion, I think there was room for us to expand the discussion. But then the onus is not on the media houses, the onus, I think, is on us who want to continue the advocacy. I think Joyanne spoke this morning about empowering the LGBT community. And so once the community is empowered, then they will, to some greater extent, be able to say to the media, speak to the media, speak to the public, not only in a video or a PSC, but more on a personal level. Bearing in mind also, we have to be mindful of issues of safety and security. But we have come a long way. I can recall when Women Against Rape was formed and we started with the media getting, there was a lot of pushback because talking about sex and gender and rape and sexual assault was not in the media spaces, period. But the point is, the discussions are out there now. So we just have to keep pushing strategically to get our message out. And as for the formation of a media association, I don't see why not. Why can't we? The Who Makes the News focuses on articles. For example, if there's a presentation by an NGO to a ministry or vice versa, you don't hear the NGO speaking, you hear the politicians speaking. Oh, we are so happy that Miss X or Miss X has made this donation to the government and to the news. So it's not the persons who are directly affected get the spotlight of the media every time. It is usually the politician or somebody who's running for some office. And so those are some of the things that we have to change so that people can understand that they have a space in the media to speak to their challenges and opportunities. Thank you.
I don't know if we have any more questions. Anybody in the audience wants to make any comments? I see we have one here. Hold on, everybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what Alex said, that it's on us, it's on activists, because, oh, sorry, Maria Fonseca from EQ. It really is on us because we, and I want to also just kind of shadow what she said about having sessions with the media, because we try to have media empowerment sessions, sensitization sessions, etc. Even just holding a press conference, like I said earlier, it's unless you something delicious. We have some very supportive people in media, like Gemma, some very supportive people. But then how much of your work is your editor going to accept for you to take the stories? When you make a story and you're like, why you cover this thing? What's about that? Then they also, some of them we found had to fight with the editors to even just bring certain items to the forefront. Sometimes they have an activity and they don't really want to cover it. So it's there, even though they are supportive sometimes, it's really necessary to get to the editors, get to the people at that level, because otherwise the reporters themselves and journalists fighting on the back each time, and even they can get tired in a sense of doing that when supporting you, but we have to always have to destroy it. So anytime we get any kind of support like that, then this offering is fantastic.
I really want to commend Gemma, commend Observer, News School for what they're doing in terms of the media supporting Antigua Barbuda. And just as an activist, an advocate, and somebody looking around a part of the population. I don't really see much of it until, and Gemma, at the rank that you are, nurse one talks about they don't send administrative people. They send people that can't implement anything. They go back, they might ask for a brief report. Sometimes it's merely verbal, but to have you here and to engage us, we are really grateful from the media perspective, because media plays such an important role. It is really sad that we don't have a strong media association in Antigua and Barbuda. I lived in 2 different islands outside of Antigua. I lived in Barbados and I lived in Jamaica. And the role of the media is so important there in really propelling important stories, and even like the investigative journalism, which is something we don't really see here. So I'm just really pleased, and I really want to thank you, Gemma. And I think we're coming to a wrap up. So Darryl, I also now want to thank you, because it's important that we see men take up space as well, engage the conversations. A lot of the times, like today, when I look around, it's mainly women who have been in the room today. Not that we haven't had any men here, but a lot of the times on the organizations, we see the women, and it's so important we see men really taking a stand and saying, yeah, but we are part of this. We understand feminist principles. We want change in our society, because the change is for all of us. So I really want to thank you, Darryl, for being here, being present, taking our questions, and even opening up some of us to Carry Man, showing us, that this exists, and so we can possibly collaborate with you, support your work. So I thank you to everybody. I also want to thank the